Hey everybody! Captains are the most unique soldier in the game of Frostgrave, but are they worth hiring? I'm Alan with Bricks and Blocks Gaming, and in this video I'll be going very in-depth, discussing their benefits, drawbacks, suggestions for how to customize them, spells that work well to support them, how to maximize their impact in a game, and my personal opinion about them. So you'll have all the information you need to decide whether you want to add one of these specialized characters to your warband. And be sure to watch till the end, where I'll be giving some house rule suggestions that you and your playgroup might want to consider. Let's get to the bricks and blocks of captains in Frostgrave. The rules for the captain can be found in Frostgrave's Sellsword supplement, which was a mini expansion originally released in 2016 and released as part of the Frostgrave Folio in 2017. These were of course written by Joseph A. McCullough and published by Osprey Games, and they were written prior to the release of the second edition for the game, so some of the rules have changed. If you decide to use captains, be sure to support the author by purchasing the Frostgrave Folio, and don't just screenshot my video for all the rules. The book is currently only around $20 US. The main things that set captains apart from all the other soldiers in the game is they're customizable when you hire them, they have special abilities, gain experience points, require ongoing payment, and each warband is limited to just one of these soldiers. They cost 100 gold crowns initially to hire, and in the second edition, they take up one of the 4 specialist slots. The captain's stats aren't phenomenal, but when hired, the player can increase either their move, fight, shoot, or will stat by 1, or their health by 2. Players also get to choose 2 of the 11 possible tricks of the trade, discussed shortly, which provide bonuses for combat, movement, and other things that the captain can use once per battle. Captains have their own experience table, rewarding them for taking down enemy figures, and as they pass levels, they can learn new tricks or do some limited stat increases. Captains don't have a special activation phase like the wizard and apprentice. Instead, they act just like all the other soldiers do. However, they are allowed to group activate with just one other soldier within 3 inches. And this is helpful so they and an ally can both charge into combat with their first action, then attack with support for their second action. Which is really thematic because it feels like they're leading the troops into battle. The equipment they start with is up to the player, and captains have 5 item slots they can fill. So you can turn them into a tank, an archer, or something in between. And equipment is the biggest change that comes for captains in the second edition. And this is because item wording and functions found in the general arms and armor list of the new core book take precedence over the captain's equipment table found in the Sellsword supplement. To begin, a minor change is leather and mail armors have been switched to light and heavy armors. In the first edition, all of the items in the captain's weapon table use up just 1 item slot. But now, 2-handed weapons take 2 slots, and bows and crossbows require a quiver, which takes up an additional slot. But the most significant change with the equipment is that daggers no longer grant +1 fight if combined with a hand weapon. But they also no longer require an item slot to equip. However, the rules for captains state they can't have a dagger if they carry a 2-handed weapon or a staff, so it can't be a backup weapon for those. And it also states they can't be combined with a shield, which is important because one idea to save an item slot would be to take a shield and dagger instead of a hand weapon, but rules as written, you can't combine them. These stipulations were placed because daggers worked totally different in the first edition, so allowing daggers to be carried regardless of other equipment might be worth house ruling with the second edition. Lastly, almost all the equipment in the captain's weapon table shows that it costs 5 gold crowns to purchase. However, in the second edition, all of the equipment for spellcasters is free, so I would assume it would also be free for the captain. I've inquired about this but never received an answer, so that might be something worth discussing with your playgroup. Captains do come with some significant drawbacks, as they require payment of 10% of all the gold crowns your team finds, and 10% of all the proceeds from sold magic items, and this increases by 1% for each level they attain. On the battlefield, they can become a liability if your opponent knows mind control, because unlike spellcasters who are immune to that spell, captains can be controlled and forced to use their special abilities against their own warband. Also, any magic items given to them are theirs permanently, so they can't be switched to another character or sold. The last special rule captains have compared to other soldiers is if they fall in combat, instead of rolling on the normal soldier survival table, they roll on a table that's similar to the spellcaster survival table. As far as how you might want to build your captain, starting with the 1 stat increase they start with, I would always recommend +1 fight or +1 shoot. The will bonus could be useful if you know your opponent has mind control, and the health might seem like a good way to help them survive, but Frostgrave really favors offensive tactics over defense, and since captains gain experience points for killing, that's really where their stats should be focused. With that, I think there's 2 main types of captains, fighters and shooters. If using the full 2nd edition rules, you should always give your captain a 0 item slot dagger as insurance in case their primary weapon is destroyed. Then, if you want to make a fighter, start with increasing their fight stat. For this build, there's a couple options of what to do with their item slots. A 2-handed weapon is nice because it deals extra damage, but a hand weapon and shield is a safer option. Personally, I would go with a 2-handed weapon early in a campaign to help them rack up a few kills, and then once they've passed a level or 2, switch to a hand weapon and shield to help ensure the investment. For armor, I think it really comes down to what other soldiers the warband has. If my main assault team is barbarians and infantrymen, I would want my captain to have a matching move of 6 to maximize options with group activating, so I'd give them light armor. If I ran 2 or 3 Templars or Knights, I would go with heavy armor, so the captain's not waiting around for his team and then underprotected in combat. These fighters would now have 2 item slots left, and while they only have a shoot value of +1, you might as well give them a bow or a crossbow and a quiver, as they might find a couple times during a battle where those would be useful. And since it's probably only a couple times, I would probably give them a crossbow that I plan to just use once and maybe never reload it, using it more as an intimidation tool to keep enemies seeking cover. But even if it's only used once, you still have to carry a quiver. And then if a non-weapon, non-armor magic item comes along that I later want to give to my captain, the ranged weapon can just be ditched. If you want to make a shooting focused captain, you'd of course raise their shoot value to +2, and then I would recommend giving them a bow instead of a crossbow, as you really want them being able to fire every turn to try to kill something. Then I'd give them light armor instead of heavy, so they can move to vantage points easier, and a hand weapon and shield to fill out their item slots. However, if my spellcasters have a spell like Leap or Transpose that can easily get the captain to a good lookout point, I'd go with heavy armor for added protection, and probably a crossbow in that case because they hopefully won't need to move around as much. And if needed to clear out space for a magic item, I'd probably swap out the shield for that, unless you use the house rule I mentioned earlier, allowing you to equip a 0 item slot dagger with a shield. And in that case, I'd drop the hand weapon, as the -1 damage that the dagger deals in combat probably won't matter too much to this shooter who hangs out in the background. Next, you get to pick 2 tricks of the trade. These can be used 1 time per battle. And since I think offense is where captains should be focused, for a fighter, I think Furious Attack is the best option, giving him a 1 time per battle +3 to a fight roll that's declared before rolls are made. For their second trick, I'd go with either coup de grace, which can be used after dealing damage, causing 2 bonus points of damage, and is a good way to deal a final blow or ensure a target falls into the wounded state. Or riposte, which adds +1 fight that can be added after rolls are made, and works as either insurance in the case of a tight roll-off, or to add 1 more damage to a successful attack. For a shooter, I'd always recommend Steady Hand, +3 to shoot declared before rolls are made, useful when you finally have a spellcaster in sight, and Deadeye, which gives +1 shoot after rolls are made, for when you need to break a tying roll or deal a little more damage. As for the other tricks of the trade that can be learned, Brace and Dodge both boost armor, and I think they would be good options to eventually learn at a later level as insurance to keep a veteran captain from dying. Sprint can be helpful if you want your captain to both keep up with charging allies and fire arrows as they run. Leadership allows a one-time group activation with up to 3 soldiers. This sounds fun, but if your captain is traveling with a group of 3 or 4 bodies, they're just asking to be hit with an elemental ball or grenade. So while it can be really strong, giving you a huge support bonus, your opponent will probably make you pay for sending a big pack of fighters at them. The last 2 traits both deal with the will stat. Nerves of Steel gives you a +4 that you declare before making a will roll, and Ironheart a +2 that can be declared after the roll. These 2 are kind of case specific, but should be considered if the opponents you face tend to spam resistible spells. Now that I've covered everything with creating a captain, it's worthwhile to compare them to some of the other soldiers you could hire into your warband. If you go with the fighter I described, you basically get a man-at-arms with 2 special tricks, a bow, a higher will stat, the ability to group activate, and the ability to carry multiple magic items. Or it's like an infantryman with all of that plus a few more health. And when not using their tricks, they aren't as good in combat as a knight, a Templar, or a barbarian. If you go with the shooter I described, you get a slow ranger with 2 tricks, a higher will, and the ability to carry multiple magic items. So it's really only the tricks of the trade that set them apart from the usual soldiers. And I think this would be fine if their only drawback was a more expensive initial hiring cost, like 250 gold crowns or something. But between found gold crowns and sold items, these captains will often drain 25, 50, or more gold crowns per battle. With that said, if you still want to build a captain, my opinion on the best way to build one would be to go with the shooter, as this allows them to stay out of the danger zone and can allow them to snipe enemies that have already taken damage, increasing the chance of them landing final blows, which is the main way they gain their experience points. This strategy does miss out on their group activation ability, but group activating can be overrated. If your captain attacks first with the support bonus, a full health opponent often won't die from their single attack, leaving the other soldier to score the kill. And if the other soldier attacks first and loses, they could get pushed out of combat, leaving the captain to now attack without the aid of their allies' support. Regardless of how you build your captain, there are some things to consider. If your captain falls early in a battle, you still have to pay them their share of the loot, assuming they survive their casualty roll. Permanent injuries they suffer can bring them well below par on crucial stats, and being badly wounded means you have to play the next battle without them, having only 7 soldiers, and they won't gain experience points since they missed the battle. However, you still have to pay them their 10% or more fee. Normally, if one of your soldiers or even a low-level apprentice suffers one of these penalties, you're usually better off stripping them of their magic equipment, dropping them, and then just hiring a new member for your team. Then re-equipping the new guy to essentially make the same character as before. But you can't do this with a captain because their items go with them and their experience points aren't tied to the wizard. Area effect spells, which I mentioned before, can neutralize the captain's group activation ability, so it's good to know what spells your opponent has, as it could be dangerous to send your captain around with an ally. Mind Control can be a devastating spell. If your captain gets controlled before they've used their tricks, nothing in the rules stops an opponent from using those against their actual warband. To really gain experience points, the captain needs to be landing finishing blows, which means they'll usually be hunting weak opponents instead of facing off against the strong members of an opposing warband, sniping wounded targets and treasure haulers, or fighting off thugs and thieves in combat, which seems kind of boring for what should be the leader of your soldiers. And the experience gains are slow. It will likely take 3 to 5 battles to gain a level, and because of this, if you choose to hire a captain, I'd recommend hiring one at the start of the campaign rather than waiting a few battles, as you'll want to start their growth process early. A final consideration is bookkeeping. It does require a little extra work to track experience points and usage of tricks during a battle. I personally don't find it to be too much work, but a lot of people appreciate the simplicity of Frostgrave, and this does add a little more complexity to the game. As far as wizard types and spells that work best with captains, I think an enchanter, like my armorer build, would be best, as combining embed enchantment with enchant weapon and enchant armor allows you to more easily maximize their item slots with a magic sword, magic bow, and magic armor. Buffing spells like strength, fleet feet, shield, or even possess, as long as your opponent doesn't have an easy way to deal with demons, are great ways to make them more effective. If you're planning to charge your captain into combat using group activation, Fog can help to block line of sight for most area effect spells. Dispel and Spell Eater are handy to keep against Mind Control, Blinding Light, and other resistible spells. Heal can keep your captain alive. If you have a strategy of using movement spells like Leap and Transpose, equipping your captain with heavy armor is a good plan, as the -1 movement penalty won't be as much of a concern. And Glow is a spell I usually skip when building a wizard because it's usually more advantageous to just cast an attack spell than it is to weaken your target with a different spell, then rely on bows to take down the opponent. However, since you want your captain to make the kill, not your spellcasters, lighting up an enemy with Glow so your captain can take them out is a great use of this spell. Looking over everything I've laid out so far, we get to the question of, are captains worth it? And in my opinion, the answer is no. Their stats are underwhelming, and their once per battle tricks of the trade don't make up for the excess cost to keep these soldiers in the warband, especially when you add the liability of them dying or getting controlled. However, the rule of cool often applies to Frostgrave, and they are really cool soldiers. Customizing them is fun, as is seeing them gain experience points and eventually leveling up stats and abilities. And many players will enjoy having them in their warbands regardless. But I do have some suggestions for house rules your playgroup might consider to make captains more balanced and appealing. You could use 1st edition equipment rules, so they can have a hand weapon, dagger, giving them +1 fight, light armor, and a bow, without also needing a quiver, filling just 4 of their item slots. The dagger change would allow a +4 fight with +1 shoot, or +3 fight with +2 shoot, with both options leaving an open item slot for a potion or other magical item, which is how they worked before the 2nd edition was released. Allow removing magic items. There's no reason the wizard can't just loan stuff to his champion without giving it to him outright. Increase their starting stats. A base fight of +3 and or shoot of +2 would make them feel much more special and fitting of the 1 captain per warband rule. Upgrading stats when leveling up. Normally, only health and will can be upgraded after their initial creation, but being able to boost fight, shoot, or move once each during the campaign seems fitting. faster leveling up. In a 10-game campaign, they may only pass 2 or 3 levels, which doesn't allow much room for growth. So possibly doubling the experience point gains could make them more exciting. I really like the idea of awarding experience points to the captain if any ally within 3 inches of them lands a fatal blow through either melee or shooting, like the captain's shouting out orders. This should help balance the danger of sending them into combat and make their group activation more important. Ditch the ongoing payments completely. Their payments feel overpriced for what they are, and getting rid of this also means less math after the game. Or have them instead pay a training fee when they have enough experience points to level up, something like 25 gold crowns per level they're attaining. Allow badly wounded captains to start the next battle at half health instead of sitting out, so you're never short on soldiers. Make them immune to mind control, or at least don't allow their tricks of the trade to be used while being controlled. Comment below with your thoughts and experiences with captains. If you use them, how you use them, any house rules you use for them, and what you think of my suggestions. I'm Alan with Bricks and Blocks Gaming. Thanks for watching and play well.